All right, welcome to this busy news-breaking edition of Hannity, reporting tonight from California. We're out on the West Coast, and tonight we have breaking news on multiple fronts. In just moments, Senator Lindsey Graham, he will join us to respond to Susan Rice, calling him a piece of bleep. But we start in the Washington swamp, where House Republicans, they are today fighting back against this corrupt, secret, behind closed doors, smoke-filled room, Venezuela-style impeachment coup attempt. Just hours ago, a group of lawmakers literally stormed into yet another top-secret session of the corrupt Adam Schiff's kangaroo court. And once again, the cowardly, corrupt Schiff, the lying Adam Schiff, well, he was set to hold yet another secret impeachment hearing with secret testimony recorded only by a secret transcript. Republicans can't even see it unless they have a Democratic minder. But then the corrupt Schiff, well, he immediately halted the session when Republican lawmakers entered the room. Now, let this be a very clear warning to Schiff and Pelosi and Democrats everywhere. Well, this secret Soviet-style impeachment coup attempt, this cannot stand. We do have a Constitution. We do have precedents. We do have something called due process. Republicans who value their Constitution and the sovereignty of the American people, this is a fight worth fighting, an injustice worth overturning. And by the way, every step of the way, every room in the U.S. Capitol, Republicans ought to have a right to be there. The president's attorneys have a right to be there. That's why it's illegitimate and unconstitutional. They are rightly tonight demanding transparency, due process, basic fairness, equal justice, and an answer to a very simple question. Well, what does the corrupt Adam Schiff have to hide? Let's take a look.
What is Adam Schiff trying to hide? I think that's a question so many people have, so many of my colleagues have, so many people in the press should have, is through those hidden closed doors over there, Adam Schiff is trying to impeach a president of the United States. Voting members of Congress are being denied access from being able to see what's happening behind these closed doors.
Now, it's obvious the corrupt, cowardly Adam Schiff, he doesn't want you, the American people, to know the whole truth. He doesn't want you to watch this kangaroo court process. Nothing could be further from the truth when he says, oh, yeah, we really want to be transparent. Now, this so-called impeachment inquiry is one big corrupt hoax, one big massive lie. And by the way, coming up tonight, lawmakers who did, in fact, take the right step and storm Schiff's top-secret session today, they will join us with more details. Let's be clear. We've said it a million times, and I'll say it again. Congressman Adam Schiff is not trustworthy. We know he is a pathological liar. He lied about having top-secret evidence of Trump-Russia collusion. He promised that to us for 2.5 years. He lied when he said that evidence of collusion was right there in plain sight. No, it wasn't. He lied about not having any prior contact with the non-whistleblower, hearsay whistleblower. And we know now that his office, in fact, had contact with the whistleblower, and we believe was given advice from his office. That would make him and people in his office material witnesses in this case. It doesn't get any more corrupt, and that's the real reason that he doesn't want this whistleblower to testify. Well, if that happened, he would likely be exposed as having been a part of this whole entire setup. And by the way, let's not forget one other thing. Big lie, Adam Schiff, he lied about the transcript of Trump's phone call with Ukraine. In fact, that guy, the corrupt Schiff, read a completely fictional transcript into the record during an official hearing. This guy lies over and over again because the truth does not fit what is a warped, vengeful, rage-induced, psychotic anti-Trump narrative of his. There was no collusion. There was no quid pro quo. We have the transcript. We don't need hearsay whistleblowers. We don't care, except what he did was wrong. He should have been honest about it. You know, we really don't care about the sham hearings he's running. What, he's going to come out of a hearing, you don't let Republicans in, you just selectively leak that which is favorable to you. You won't even let Republicans see the entire transcript unless they have a Democratic staffer, a minder go in. That is their job. They, too, have due process rights. The president's attorney, yeah, they should be in the room every single time. Now, the president was freely and fairly elected in an electoral college landslide, and ever since he has been elected, he's been faithfully executing his sworn duty to the Constitution and to this country. One of those sworn duties, detailed Article 2, Section 3 of the United States Constitution, requires that the president uphold the laws of the land. Well, that would include Ukraine election interference in 2016. That would include Biden using taxpayer dollars, $1 billion taxpayer dollars, shaking down Ukraine to get a prosecutor fired who we now know was investigating his son. The same son who had no experience with gas, energy, oil, or the country of Ukraine. No experience. He's being paid millions of dollars. Prosecutors investigating him. Joe says, you got 6 hours. 6 hours. You're not getting the money unless you fire that prosecutor. We now know that was investigating his son. So that sounds to me like they were trying to buy favor and goodwill from the Bidens. Why on earth would you pay a kid that had no experience? He's not a kid. He's 49 years old. Why would you pay the son of a vice president millions of dollars when he has zero experience in anything related to Ukraine or energy? Now, this is why it's so critically important that the administration and Republicans in Congress do their job, get to the bottom of all of this, on top of what we have identified as the single biggest abuse of power, corruption scandal in modern American political history. Now, we have an update. The Inspector General's FISA report, well, we know it's finished. It's still not been released to the public. Now, we've seen delay after delay after delay after delay. Now, why? Well, Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa tweeted, quote, well, all of the delays and all the excuses why the Horowitz IG FISA report isn't public yet after several months of anticipation, well, that leads me to be suspicious it's going to be deep six by the deep state. Now, tonight, I don't know why the findings are not yet public. I'm as angry as everybody else because we already know what happened. We know there was premeditated fraud on the FISA court because we know the bulk of information was the Hillary Clinton bought and paid for dirty Russian dossier. Oh, so they could help her get elected in 2016. And by the way, what did we learn from that? That they never verified it and it was unverifiable. That would mean the deep state is protecting their own. We will find out. Eventually, we need to get to the truth. Now I'm told the first week of November. I guess I shouldn't hold my breath. Now, thankfully, investigative reporter John Solomon, he'll join us in a few minutes with positive news about the FISA report. He also has other breaking new details about the origins of the Russia witch hunt. Now, that investigation is being led by U.S. Attorney John Durham, and it's now ongoing, and it is now expanding in size and scope because of new explosive evidence. Tonight, Fox News is reporting that this brand new evidence was uncovered during a recent trip to Rome with the Attorney General Bill Barr. He was there. Durham's been there. Now, keep in mind, this probe is focused on whether or not the powerful tools of our intelligence community were weaponized against you, we, the American people, and people associated with and affiliated with the Trump campaign, and whether or not intel officials at the highest levels to circumvent U.S. law were outsourcing surveillance against innocent Americans by other countries. In other words, they're getting their friends in the intel community in Italy and Australia and Great Britain to do things they couldn't do legally here. Okay, well, that would make you guilty of circumventing the laws. Now, both countries are now fully cooperating with the Durham probe. We can report that tonight. And according to a report from the Washington Examiner, we now have identified 4 notorious deep state figures are now wrapped up to their eyeballs in this investigation, including Obama's CIA chief, John Brennan, Obama's director of national intelligence, James Clapper, fired FBI agent, guy in the middle of all of it, Peter Strzok. Also, the author of Hillary Clinton's dirty Russian dossier. That would be Christopher Steele himself. Now, this is big news tonight, and now the walls seem to finally be caving in, and we're going to get to the truth. Now, what are these 4 men? What do they all have in common? Well, 1, they all possess a rage and psychotic hatred for all things Donald Trump. And 2, they should all be very, very nervous tonight, because U.S. Attorney John Durham, the Attorney General Bill Barr, They are pushing to get to the truth. One other good sign is that Durham and his investigation is gaining serious traction. You got Brennan's current colleague at MSDNC. That would be Area 51, Roswell Rachel Maddow, MSDNC. They're trying to spin the upcoming findings. They know it's going to be bad with a brand new conspiracy theory. See, they were peddling conspiracy theories, lies, propaganda, misinformation, wrong day after day, week after week, month after month, and it went on for years. And now they're trying to prepare themselves for when the real truth is coming out. Let's take a look.
It really does seem like they are going to use the power of the U.S. Justice Department to help them make that case that the Democrats are the real source of the scandal here. With what Barr and Durham appear to be doing here to try to boost the president's campaign, they are crossing a bit of a Rubicon in terms of what the U.S. government is for. And part of what we're going to have to figure out when this is all over is how we cross back over it.
Now after 2+ years, 2.5 years of lies, they're back at it. More conspiracy theories, more lies, more speculation, zero facts. There you have it. Area 51, Roswell Rachel Maddow at it again. When will they ever learn? They don't care about learning. For them, it's an agenda. For them, it's about all things Democrat. For them, it's get rid of Trump any way we can. Truth? Well, that doesn't matter to her or anyone else, frankly, on that network. But still, someone might want to remind NBC's chief conspiracy theorist that U.S. Attorney John Durham is an investigator long respected by both sides of the aisle. In fact, he was previously appointed by 2 Democratic attorney generals to investigate highly sensitive cases. Remember Janet Reno? Well, she selected Durham to investigate corrupt law enforcement officials and their dealings with notorious gangster Whitey Bulger. Eric Holder appointed Durham himself to lead the DOJ's investigation into the use of enhanced interrogation techniques. And Durham's ongoing investigation now into the origins of the Russia witch hunt is not a political stunt. It's a very real probe about real abuses of power. What happened in 2016 and beyond? If this continues to happen, you don't have a constitution, you don't have rule of law, you don't have equal justice under the law, and you don't have equal application of our laws. And there's got to be a reckoning in the deep state. Because if they keep doing this, they'll get you 6 ways. But Sunday, Chuck Schumer said, we're going to lose those constitutional protections that we thought we had in this country. Now, also breaking tonight, investigative reporter John Solomon, we go back to him. He has brand new evidence that Comey's FBI knew that the dirty Russian dossier was garbage. They knew it, but they used it anyway to willfully defraud a FISA court and obtain a warrant to spy on the Trump campaign associate by the name of Carter Page, which gave him a backdoor into all things Trump world. That would be the Trump campaign, transition, and presidency.